And while Locke was the chief source for the ideas in the Declaration of Independence, there were other intellectual sources that helped lead to the Declaration. The Declaration was written near the end of the period in history known as the Enlightenment. During the Enlightenment, learning, philosophy, and the study was a cultural norm, and it was highly stressed. The theories of Hobbes and Locke came out in the early Enlightenment, and these ideas were still in vogue almost 100 years later. Part of the reason for this was the scientific revolution that was going on at the same time, which led to a belief in what is called the clockwork universe. The clockwork universe was the idea that all of the universe worked like a clock, with certain parts moving in certain predictable ways according to basic laws of nature. And if one could merely study these laws enough, you could understand them and possibly control them. Keep in mind that part of the scientific revolution was Galileo discovering the movements of a planet in an orderly and predictable way, like a clock, and Newton discovering the basics of gravity and modern physics and seeing how the laws worked in perfect conjunction with one another, always in certain ways. This belief in the clockwork universe, that the natural world worked off immutable laws, suggested a belief that human nature could also be described by similar laws, which could lead to forming a government that was set up on perfectly scientific principles. May not have worked out practically, but this was a belief at the time. While this line of thought is probably more seen in the creation of the U.S. Constitution, it is a line of thought that influenced the period of the American Revolution, in the thought that they could create a better government than the one under George III. Further, it's important to consider the religious nature of much of American colonization. While the profit motive drove many of the early colonists, many others came to escape religious wars in Europe between Catholics and Protestants at the time in Europe. As you probably know, many of the early colonists were Puritans coming to America to escape religious persecution in Europe. They came to America to set up an ideal civilization from which the rest of the world could see how a perfect Christian community could act. As one of their leaders, Jonathan Winthrop, said in his sermon, A Model of Christian Charity, he described the colony that they would set up as being a shining city on the hill. This shining city of America would serve as a model for the rest of the world to emulate and model itself off of. Now, while the Puritan overtones of the New England colonies faded, this idea that America was a place set aside to serve as a model for the rest of the world was still alive and well at the time of the Revolution, and arguably to some degree today. Further, the Revolution occurred immediately after a period of religious fervor known as the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening was a period that saw the rise of several religious factions, such as the Unitarians, like John and Abigail Adams and Benjamin Franklin, who believed in God but doubted the divinity of Jesus, and Deism, which Thomas Jefferson likely followed, a belief that God had set up a clockwork universe that ran itself, and that God took no personal action in the universe after its creation. The importance of these religious beliefs was that no matter what form they took, the Great Awakening seemed to always strive to convey the importance of the individual and individual rights and choices. That this stress on individualism was so fervent at the time only bolstered a feeling that tyranny, i.e., King George III, must be opposed.